Hi there everyone! 2023 has now come to an end, and as we brace ourselves for 2024, it is only natural to reminisce and look back on the year we just finished. For me personally, one really enjoyable aspect of 2023 was field herping, the activity of searching for reptiles and amphibians. Field herping has become one of my favorite pastimes over the last several years and has taken me to different places across the United States. This was definitely the case in 2023, as I spent the year living and traveling between Florida, Georgia, and New England, while herping in those regions as well. Since 2021, I have ended each year by producing a comprehensive video where I have recapped the herping adventures I experienced. To end 2021, I made a video where I recapped my top 10 favorite herping memories of that year. This was the first time that I lived and herped outside of New England and the northeastern United States when I moved down south in August. As a result, I got to see a different diversity of herptofauna for the first time. 2022 was the first year that I was able to herp year-round, as I spent the first 8 months living in South Georgia and the last 4 in the state of Oklahoma. The result of this constant herping resulted in so many memories that when the year ended, I found it impossible to make a top 10 list. Instead, I made a video where I went month by month and recapped my herping adventures. 2023 was very similar to 2022 in the fact that I was able to herp mostly year-round, as I lived in South Florida for over 9 months. I also produced over 40 herping vlog episodes this year, which I feel altogether highlight and recap my herping adventures. So to do something different, I decided that for the 2023 herping finale comprehensive video, I would separate all the herps I found into taxonomic groups. From there, I would go through each group where I would list and highlight the herps I found. Then, I would finish by saying how many reptiles and amphibians I found in total during 2023. Before we begin, I wanted to quickly explain how I will separate different reptiles and amphibians I herped in 2023. This will be done at both the species and subspecies level, as I personally feel that some subspecies within a species are so unique that they count as different herps entirely. Also, every herp on this list I had to find in the wild, but not every single one was alive. Herps that I've only found dead will appear on this list if they very recently passed away, so bones and remains will not count unless I saw those herps alive. In order for a herp to count as a lifer, on the other hand, on the 2023 list, meaning that I found them for the first time, they must be alive in addition to being in the wild. So, let's get this intro over with, and I will tell you how many reptiles and amphibians I herped in 2023. To start, we are going to first list all the amphibians I herped in 2023, and we'll begin with salamanders. In 2023, I completely dropped the ball in herping for salamanders and finished the year with a total of just 2. Yeah, living in the Everglades for most of the year probably had something to do with this, but to be honest, it is still kind of embarrassing that I only found 2 different salamanders in 2023. Especially given the success I have had in the last couple of years in herping for them. The first salamander I herped in 2023 was a slimy salamander from the Georgia coastal plain during January. Other than that, I only managed to snag a couple of redback salamanders from New England who both quickly escaped from my grasp. So in 2024, I desperately need to redeem myself and find a bunch of salamanders. I did far better in the frogs and toads department, as I finished 2023 with a total of 16 different species and subspecies. Frogs and toads are probably some of the easiest herps to find because you don't have to see them to know that they're around. Just use your ears and you can hear them calling up a storm. Of the 16 different frogs and toads I herped in 2023, 3 of them were lifers. This included finding my first gopher frog, found in the xeric sandhills of northern Florida, with my friend Will during September. Gopher frogs are an imperiled species and only live in gopher tortoise burrows, so to see one was very cool. Living in South Florida for most of the year, I crossed paths with dozens of cane toads. These are highly poisonous amphibians that are invasive to the United States and have caused ecological devastation, most notably in Australia. I will say that it did blow my mind to see toads the size of bullfrogs hopping around, though. The last lifer amphibian I had in 2023 was finally seeing eastern spadefoot toads for the first time. This occurred during a rainy June night in New England when I road cruised 10 individuals in an hour. I'd been searching for these primitive cryptic frogs in New England, where they're very challenging to find, for several years. So I was beyond happy that I finally timed a rainy night right and got to see them. While I have seen and heard this species before, 2023 was the first time I got to capture footage of eastern narrowmouth toads, another tiny frog that was pretty common to see in the Everglades. The most significant frog and toad find of 2023, and one of my most noteworthy herp observations to date, occurred in the beginning of February when my friends Judy, Amelia, and myself road cruised a southern toad trying to eat a dead baby Florida cottonmouth. I think this southern toad bit off way more than it could chew, but it was impressive to watch it remain persistent in trying to swallow the dead snake. We now move on to the reptiles, where we will be breaking them up into multiple groups. To start, I found two species of crocodilians in 2023, the American alligator and the American crocodile. It was an unbelievable privilege to live in South Florida, which is the only place in the world where crocodiles and alligators naturally occur together. Though I was hoping to see an invasive species of caiman, which also occur in this part of the world, but alas, that would not end up happening. I saw hundreds of alligators between my time in Georgia and Florida in 2023, but it was in the latter where I was truly impressed. I completely understand why some Floridians are numb to seeing alligators, because they are literally everywhere across most of the state, and if they had lived there long enough, it makes sense. But to me, finding a swamp puppy is something that never gets old. And when I see them trucking along on the side of the road, especially dinosaur-sized individuals, I am left in a state of awe. Of the hundreds of alligator encounters I had in 2023, my most memorable was seeing two large males fighting along the side of the road in the Everglades during the summer. I can't come up with the words to describe what it was like to watch these two titans battling each other. When I saw American crocodiles in the wild last year for the first time, my inner child came out, and I could have spent all day watching them. To see such a charismatic animal in its habitat felt like a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Living in the Everglades during 2023 meant that I had the opportunity to see American crocodiles on an almost daily basis, which was an incredible privilege. I saw plenty of crocodiles in 2023 of all sizes, from newborn babies trying to survive a challenging world to monster 15-footers who I felt could have swallowed me whole. I got to see multiple individuals basking on land for the first time, including on beaches in the Gulf of Mexico, and captured underwater footage of a huge adult while kayaking in the same area I found an alligator in the year prior. There were too many memorable encounters with the American crocodile in 2023 for me, but one that stands out was when I road cruised a baby at night during late summer. It was the only time I got to use my macro lens on a crocodile, and I did not let the dozens of mosquitoes biting me to stop me from doing so. Next, we move on to another unique group of reptiles, and those are the turtles. In case you didn't know, dear viewer, turtles make me happy, but I'm sure that I'm not the only one who feels the same way. In 2023, I found 15 different species of turtles, and technically only one of them was a lifer. I'd worked with wild green sea turtles before at the Georgia Sea Turtle Center, and even released one back into the wild. However, I had never technically herped one before until May of this year, when I saw an adult come to take a breath of air underneath the 7-mile bridge in the Florida Keys. However, it went back underwater before I could even pull my phone out of my pocket. This would be the running theme of green sea turtles I herped, as I found a couple while snorkeling off the Florida Keys during the summer, but all were too far away to appear on my camera. I did capture footage of baby loggerhead sea turtles making the mad dash to the ocean in 2023, which is something I have done before, but this was the first time that I got to capture underwater footage of them swimming. It is worth mentioning that I was really close to seeing my lifer huxbill sea turtle, as my dad and my friend Peter each saw one while I snorkeled with each of them off the Florida Keys, but was too far away and underwater to know where they were. Some other memorable encounters I had this year was finding a couple of spotted turtles basking in New England during late November, finding 5 Florida box turtles in 24 hours in the Everglades, finding hatchling red-bellied cooters in an alligator nest, and seeing several massive female Florida softshell turtles. I always find lizards incredibly fascinating, especially because I never had the opportunity to see them growing up in New England, except for invasive Italian wall lizards. In 2023, I managed to herp 20 species of lizards, which was boosted from South Florida's invasive biodiversity that exceeds the rest of the eastern United States. As a result, I managed to find several lifers throughout the year. The one native lifer I had in 2023 was the island glass lizard, and found several individuals throughout the year. Unfortunately, many were being predated on by birds, including one that I saved for some angry crows, as I could not let nature take its course. But 2023 was defined by the invasive lizards, as I would go on to find 7 lifers during my time in South Florida. Before we talk about the lifers, I did want to mention a couple of other invasive lizards that I had seen in previous years, but found them much more often in 2023. The green iguana was a species I had seen a couple times prior to this year, but this year I saw hundreds of them. Whether it was a bunch of them eating grass along the side of a canal or a busy road, or seeing them climbing and sleeping in trees, they were plentiful, to say the least. Peter's rockagamas were another species I had seen previously, but I found them all the time in 2023. I saw so many of these lizards running around on sidewalks and on people's driveways across South Florida that they seemed like squirrels to me. The brown basilisk was a species that I had only seen one time before in my cousin's neighborhood a few years ago. In 2023, I found a bunch of individuals, usually around or in trees, but saw none of them run across the water like the Jesus Christ lizards people often referred to them as. Now, let's get to the lifers. The first I found was a northern curly-tailed lizard in Fort Lauderdale during February. Their curly tails and expressive personalities made finding one very entertaining. I would go on to see a bunch of curly tails during the rest of my time in South Florida, including many in the Florida Keys. One day after snorkeling, I noticed a bunch were hanging around rocks on a beach, so I grabbed my camera and filmed as many as I could. In March, I visited Key Biscayne for the first time, and found around 50 black spiny tail iguanas in just one afternoon. These lizards are the fastest in the world, but it was incredible to watch how well they have adapted to living in urban environments and how oblivious other people were to these lizards' presence. Also in March, I would go on to find my lifer Cuban night anole, which looks like a more patterned native green anole that was given super soldier serum. I would see several more over the course of the year, almost always up a tree. During March, my friends Lucas and Greg and myself found an ashe gecko under a log in the Florida Keys, but it managed to escape somehow from all 3 of our hands before I could get footage of it. Back in February, I road cruised a dying Tokay's gecko and would not see any more until the end of October, when we found several during some night work. It was really remarkable to see geckos the size of small iguanas and hear a lizard vocalize for the first time. Perhaps the most unique invasive lizard I saw was during the end of October, and that was my lifer veiled chameleon. I had seen several wild-caught chameleons before, but this was the first time I saw one in the wild, and the first adult I ever saw. Later that night, Peter would climb 20 feet up a tree to catch an absolutely stunning male chameleon. Watching these lizards crawling up our arms was so surreal, and I was happy to end my time in South Florida with finally seeing one. But the main reason why I was in South Florida to begin with was to work for the national park to manage populations of Argentine black and white tegus. Despite being an ecological nightmare as an invasive species, tegus are quite impressive lizards. I would go on to catch and handle hundreds of tegus during 2023, but only saw a handful moving out and about. I was able to capture footage of only one walking around an outdoor dining area. If I had to pick a favorite group of herps, I think that snakes would probably be it. I spent countless hours targeting snakes in 2023, and the results paid off. I found 35 different types of snakes, which is more than any other group of reptiles and amphibians in 2023. As a result, I'll be breaking snakes into 3 separate groups. The first will be the native colubrids, or non-venomous snakes, then the native venomous snakes, and finally, invasive snakes. I would go on to find 27 different colubrids in 2023, including species and subspecies, along with 9 lifers. Let's start with most herpers' favorite group of snakes, and that would be the genre of Lampripeltis, or commonly referred to as milk and king snakes. I found 3 lifer Lampripeltis in 2023, with the first being my lifer scarlet king snake that my friend Judy and I road cruised on 2 separate occasions in the Everglades during April. On an insanely humid and mosquito-filled night in July, my friends Deanna, Sarah, and myself road cruised my lifer Brooks king snake, which was in the same area as my lifer scarlet king snake. The last Lampripeltis lifer would be the most surprising, as I was super lucky to see 2 mole king snakes, a hatchling and an adult, during the same day in early October in the coastal plain of Georgia. During that same Georgia trip, Peter flipped my second ever eastern king snake, and it was also the first adult I found, so I didn't care at all that it was in shed. Switching gear to the Nerodia, or New England water moccasins.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard.
New England water moccasins.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
I mean, water snakes, LOL. I found 2 lifers in 2023. The first would be my lifer Florida green water snake, which instantly became my favorite Nerodia, as the females are capable of reaching 6 feet in length. To me, these big gals look like anacondas, and I found a bunch of them in the Everglades. Perhaps the most unique Nerodia was my second lifer, and that was the mangrove salt marsh snake, or Nerodia clarkii, that I found in June. I would go on to see a few more clarkii, but the orange and red ones were easily my favorite. I saw 2 lifer rat snakes in 2023, which included the beautiful orange Everglades rat snake. Yeah, I know, these are technically a subspecies of the eastern rat snakes, but tell the average person that these 2 snakes are the same species. Come on. The other rat snake lifer I had in 2023 was the gray rat snake, which I found in North Florida in September. This is actually a different species from the eastern rat snake, so it was definitely a lifer. Another snake I was surprised to find out was its own species was the Florida brown snake, and I found several in 2023, including some angry ones. The last colubrid lifer was probably my most memorable herp lifer of the whole year, and that was finally...
Stop it. Get some help.
Seeing my lifer southern hognose snake. This had been my #1 target to herp for the last 2 years, so I was over the moon to see one. I saw 3 Simus in one day in Georgia during October, including a beautiful adult, and then a month later, I hiked up a hatchling in North Florida. There were plenty of other memorable encounters with the 18 other native colubrids I saw in 2023, such as finding 5 eastern hognose snakes, which included 2 adults together in New England, an adult and a hatchling found in the same area in Georgia, and another hatchling from North Florida. This is my favorite snake in the world and the most I ever saw in 1 year. I also found my third ever smooth green snake under a rock in New England, 24 scarlet snakes in one night, and dozens more during my time in the Everglades, plenty of corn snakes, including a few climbing trees, and a couple moving during downpour rain, which is kind of strange, and my last snake of the year, which was one of the largest black racers I have ever seen that my friend Will and I got in New England, and it did not want to take a selfie. In regards to venomous snakes, I found 6 different, technically species, in total during 2023, but without a doubt, there was one that I saw more than any other snake in 2023, and that was, of course, a cottonmouth. This is the Florida cottonmouth, and we've seen a bunch lately, so that's a Florida cottonmouth, you little baby cottonmouth. Cottonmouth, this cottonmouth. We have another cottonmouth. That is at least a 4-foot cottonmouth. Cruise the second cottonmouth of the day, and this thing is enormous. It's a Florida cottonmouth. This is a Florida cottonmouth. This is the 5th cottonmouth that I've gotten in the last 24 hours. This is another cottonmouth, the younger cottonmouth. We have yet another cottonmouth on the night. Alright, so right after that first cottonmouth, we got our second one on the night. Third cottonmouth of the night. Alright, so we just got a cottonmouth on the road. This is a Florida cottonmouth. Another cottonmouth. Here's our 4th cottonmouth. 5th cottonmouth number 6 on the night, like 6 or 7, but cottonmouth number 8 on the night, another cottonmouth on the night, cottonmouth number 10, our 11th Florida cottonmouth on the night, 12th Florida cottonmouth of the night. Here is cottonmouth number 13 on the night. Yeah, I found a lot of Florida cottonmouths in 2023, all in Florida, by the way. The one other cottonmouth I found outside of Florida was technically a lifer, as it was Echistrodon piscivorus and not Echistrodon conati. So just cottonmouth, or northern cottonmouth, or eastern cottonmouth, or whatever common name you want to call it. The next venomous snake I found the most often was the dusky pygmy rattlesnake, which is kind of surprising because while cottonmouths are the most common snake in the Everglades, pygmy rattlesnakes are not even the most common rattlesnake in the Everglades. Yet I somehow managed to see 10 of them in the Everglades, even if 5 were from one night in April. In fact, of the 16 dusky pygmy rattlesnakes I saw in all of 2023, 10 of them occurred in 2 of the 365 days of the year, as I found 4 in one day in Central Florida during September. 15 of the 16 were in Florida, and 1 was in Georgia. The one snake I hope to see more than once in 2023 was the eastern diamondback rattlesnake. However, I could not imagine that I would finish 2023 with herping 13 alive eastern diamondbacks. I soon came to discover that the Everglades has very high density of EDBs, as 12 of the 13 came from there. What really surprised me was, after hearing that EDBs are strictly diurnal throughout most of their range, the Everglades might be the one place where they move pretty regularly at night. I found a 4-footer crossing the road at 9 p.m. and several hatchlings moving well after dark and one after 11 p.m. The one EDB that I did not find in the Everglades occurred in the coastal plain of Georgia, which was very memorable for different reasons. It was the first one I herped on the Georgia mainland, as Peter and I, who found it, were able to show it to several other herpers who had never seen one before, including my friend Dean, who I worked with in Oklahoma, who happened to be in Georgia at the time. 2023 would be a slow year compared to previous regarding timber rattlesnakes for me, but the 2 that I found were both canebrakes in South Georgia. One was a hatchling that we found crossing the road at 1:30 in the morning after a rainstorm, and the other was an adult we flipped under a piece of tin. The last venomous snake I saw in 2023 was easily the most impactful lifer, and that was the eastern coral snake. Seeing my first elapid ever in late August put me over the moon again, but there was no way I could have predicted that I would see 6 more in the next 2 months. 5 were in the Everglades, including one a couple of 100 feet away from my house that Peter found 2 weeks after my lifer, in fact, and a couple weeks after that, Will and I cruised one in the Xeric Sandhills of North Florida. We will end our snake section by talking about 2 invasive snakes I saw. Now, I was hoping to see more invasive snakes such as rainbow boas in South Florida, but that would not be the case. The two that I did find were both lifers, and the first was in February. A 12-foot long male African rock python we removed during a survey with FWC. African rock pythons are very rare in South Florida and were believed to have been successfully eradicated, but a couple of individuals have been found over the last few years, and the one we removed was the first of 2023. On 4/20 of all days, I was walking a trail in the Everglades at night and found a tiny scarlet snake. I immediately looked up and saw a 9-foot Burmese python on the side of the trail, and it was the first I ever herped. I would go on to see a bunch of Burmese pythons in South Florida during the summer months, which included when Peter and I removed 17 hatchlings and 1 yearling during a 2-night stretch in July. Finding a Burmese python in the Everglades is always a mixed bag of emotions. On one hand, they are one of the most beautiful snakes I've ever laid eyes on, and seeing one over 10 feet long crossing the road completely changes your perspective on what is and what isn't a big snake. However, their impact on the South Florida ecosystem has been incredibly devastating over the past couple of decades. So whatever decision you make after catching a Burmese python, it is never an easy one if you are passionate about reptiles and ecology like myself. Well, drumroll please, dear viewer, here are the final results. The final tally for the number of different species and subspecies of reptiles and amphibians I herped in 2023 was 90. If we divide this number between all the different taxonomic groups I covered, snakes made up nearly 40% of the herps I saw this year. Salamanders were way down there with crocodilians at 2%, and everything else was relatively close together. 25 of the 90 different herps I found were lifers in 2023, and 65 I'd seen before in previous years. When comparing the number of reptiles and amphibians I found in the 3 regions I herped in during 2023, Florida was significantly higher compared to New England and Georgia. One thing that is different about this graph compared to the others is that I found several of the same herps in multiple regions. So for example, I found American crocodiles in both Georgia and Florida, along with seeing common garter snakes in New England and Florida. The eastern hognose was the only herp I found in all 3 regions during 2023, so as a result, the sum of the numbers in this graph will exceed 90. As we enter 2024, I am really excited for another year of field herping. Hopefully, I will see new lifers and other herps that I've grown to love. I wanted to end by thanking everyone who has and continues to support my YouTube channel. I am really appreciative, and it has been so enjoyable to watch the channel grow over the last 3 years. I am also really excited to upload videos of my herping adventures and other wildlife content in 2024. If you liked this video and have not done so already, consider subscribing to my channel if you want. Feel free to check out some of my other videos and stay tuned for future uploads. Thank you all, and I hope you have a happy new year.